of the state, okay, as, okay, when you see the concept of the state and the 10th chapter, page number 107, you can find out whatever I am teaching here, everything it will be there in the page number 107 to then after. Okay. So here, meaning of state. Let us first we try to trace meaning. I just tell you, man used to live in caves for such a long time. Okay. When man and lives in the caves, who do not know how to adjust, who do not know anything, how to make the family. Is that clear? Soon after, in the evolutionary process, the person started to getting the things about the society. He used to leave from caves to generally there is in constructions of home, and who started to making relations with one another, like family, brother and cousins and all of them. When he started in a member of family, when he created a family, then after one family started making of a big family, the big family started to making of community. This entire communities and leads to the making of society. So one process and the beginning process start up with this evolution of a person's brain. When evolution of person brain, after that, man created in its own society. When after that, its society itself created as a kind of a number of societies, created a big, state. So what is the state here? If you see them, okay, state in general meaning is nothing but a population, a good territory, and whatever they have together, and all this comes under the purview of meaning of a state in a general meaning according to Aristotle. And if you could see this state and the meanings in the other, definitions of the state, if you could see, you know, Blunsky is one of the greatest thinkers in the political science who gave definition of state. Okay, state is nothing but in another meaning, it deals the things of life of the people. It deals the things of territory of the people. It deals the things which are related to different communities and all of them. In general meaning, it is called it as a state. But according to Blunsky, who have defined the state as the state is the politically organized people of definite territory. Okay, a state is politically organized people of a definite territory, which means the people who have created a particular territory, those who are living in the particular territory, that it can be called it as an and state according to landscape. Okay. For example, see, we can't call the state animal state. Can we call the animal state? No. Can we call the, if in the group of trees who are there, can we call the state? We can't call the state if then many trees are there in the one particular place, but that it can be called it as a forest. See, if it is no area, no, people who lives in the particular area, everything it's like an, empty place, that it can be called it as a desert. But the state is the word which denoted the meaning, according to Blansky, is that organized society, the place which has consist of an organized society, and where peoples have occupied in the particular territory. Okay, particular territory, it can be called it as a state in the views of Blansky. The definitions is very practically says that the way peoples lives in the particular place and where they are living in a very organized method, it can be called it as a state in the view of Blansky. As you know, another thinker who's also called as a father of public administration, his name Woodrow Wilson. He's from United States of America, who gave definition to the state. In the view of this Woodrow Wilson, what is the state meaning? Here is that he says that a state is the people organized for law within a definite territory. Comparatively to Blansky, definitions has given an equally by the Woodrow Wilson. He says that a state which actually has consist of organized people, organized society, where actually they made it as a particular law. Okay, ఏ ప్లేస్ లో అయితే అంటే the people who lives in the particular place, who have created its own law for the living of their life, okay, and in the particular territory. He gave three options. When Blunsky says that ఏ ప్లేస్ లో అయితే ఆర్గనైజ్డ్ గా ఒక కమ్యూనిటీ, ఒక ఫ్యామిలీ అంటే నంబర్ ఆఫ్ ఫ్యామిలీస్ ఉంటాయో ఆ యొక్క पर्टिकुलर प्लेस ने మనం स्टेट अंटाम. ओके, जहां पे लोग यहाँ पर एक पर्टिकुलर प्लेस में ऑर्गेनाइज के तहत यहाँ पे हो जाते हैं, यहाँ पे रह सकते हैं सारे लोग, डिफरेंट लैंग्वेजेस एंड डिफरेंट कल्चर जो प्रैक्टिस करते हुए ऑर्गेनाइज्ड वे में यहाँ पे लोग पर्टिकुलर प्लेस में जीते हैं, वो जहां पे जिएंगे वो प्लेस को जनरली इट इज कॉल्ड इट एज अ स्टेट, isn't it? Where, I mean, this, and also he says that in the particular way of this, I mean, law, people who lives in the particular place, who are organized way flourished, and even they practice the law. Okay, even they practice a particular law, that it can be called it as a state in the view of and Woodrow Wilson. He is the father of public administration. Okay, another author, I mean, if you see the thinker Harold J. Lasky, meaning of the state, it's been discussed here. A state is a territorial society divided into the government and subjects claiming within its allocated physical area a supremacy over all other institutions. Lasky's definitions is so scientific and it's a very practical one. If you could understand that one, the place which it can be divided into the government. Okay, like see for example India, we have state government, central government, local government. These the features of an India, truly we can call it as an Indian government, isn't it? Because of the area which is divided into the territories, 4 types of territories, isn't it? And the subject claiming, it has been in claiming particular welfare policies and all of them, and they are lives in the particular physical area. They have their own supreme powers they are utilizing. So here the importance he has given territory, populations, and all of them. So which is to be called it as a state. Altogether, if you could see the Aristotle definitions, who is the father of political science, says that a place which consists of population, a place which consists of good territory, a place which consists of a good government, a place which consists of a sovereignty. Where a place has a population, government, sovereignty, or territory, all these things comes under the purview of a state. Understand? जहां पे पब्लिक रहते हैं, I mean जहां पे population होगी, जहां पे सही तरीके से टेरिटरी होंगी, और जहां पे गवर्नमेंट होंगी, जहां पे पब्लिक ऑर्गेनाइज्ड वे में यहाँ पे लिविंग कर रहे हैं, इस सारे प्लेस को अपन व्हाट वी कॉल्ड हियर इज दैट స్టేట్ అంటాం. ఒక ప్రాదేశిక ప్రాంతంలో ఉన్నటువంటి జనాలు అంటే క్రమబద్ధమైన రీతిలో నివసించి అక్కడ ఉన్న ప్రభుత్వం గాని అక్కడ ఉన్నటువంటి ప్లేస్ ఉండడం ఎప్పుడైతే ఉంటుందో దాన్ని మనం జనరల్ గా స్టేట్ అనేటటువంటి పేరుతో పిలుస్తాం. ఓకే, స్టేట్ అనే పదం జనరల్ గా వి యూజ్ అ రాష్ట్రం, but the meaning is a desham also. Okay, the state means is nothing but a country. Okay, a country where actually consists of 4 elements. One is in population, another one is in territory, and another one is that in the government and the sovereignty. If any place has a 4 elements, it can be called it as a state according to the views of Aristotle, who is the father of political science. Okay, so here is that when it comes to the point of, and these are all the definitions makes us to tell us what is a state means. The state which consists of, isn't it? Let me explain that here. And and according to Aristotle, which is to be called it as a state means the place which it can be good for inhabitant. Say for example, నేను ఇందాక చెప్తున్నప్పుడు इससे पहले मैं जो बता रहा था आप लोग को, देखिए यहाँ पे अगर झाड़ पौधे पेड़ अगर रहे तो उसको अपन स्टेट नहीं बुलाते, isn't it? अगर आप यहाँ पे सारा यहाँ पे डिजर्ट एरिया होगा तो उसको भी अपन स्टेट नहीं बुला सकते, क्योंकि उसको डिजर्ट एरिया बोल सकते, ठीक है ना? अगर सारे यहाँ पे जंगल, सारे यहाँ पे different types of bushes and all there, we can't call it as a state. We can call it as an group of trees. If a place it's been unoccupied, that it can be called it as a forest. Similarly, इसको state यहाँ पे बुलाते हैं, which is to be called as a better state, and the state is that, and where 4 elements are there, जहाँ पे 4 elements रहेंगे उसको state बोलेंगे. वहां पे पहला एलिमेंट क्या है? पॉपुलेशन है. Which is the first element is that the population, which is the second element is the territory, government and sovereignty. Then what is a population and how state elements explain that? Why do we call it as in where if there is a population, why do we say that that is a state? Because of without a population, can you call it as a state? देखिए, अगर आप यहाँ पे तेलंगाना स्टेट मानते हैं, तेलंगाना स्टेट में आप क्या नहीं देख सकते यहाँ पे गवर्नमेंट है, आप नहीं देख सकते कि सॉवरेनिटी है, आप नहीं बोल सकते कि यहाँ पे पॉपुलेशन जी रहे हैं, isn't it? But without all these four elements, can you call it as a Telangana state? आप बोल सकते हैं. You can't say that the Telangana state. Instead of it, you can say desert or forest and anything which comes in there. One second. One second. Yes, let us discuss here why these four elements are essence to understand that is the meaning of a state. Let me explain here. Elements of the state are four. One is a population, territory, government, and sovereignty. The state, which is here, the meaning is that if populations are being called it as if any particular area has a consist of a population, and what kind of a populations is required according to the view of this Aristotle. For example, a good population leads to the good state, isn't it? A bad population always leads to the bad state. Let me say, for example, अगर आप कोई भी स्टेट में यहाँ पर इंटेलिजेंट पब्लिक अगर नहीं रही, या ना तो सारे के सारे लोग दीवाने यहाँ पे, सारे के सारे लोग यहाँ पे पागल है, तो उसको पागल स्टेट बोला जाता, isn't it? अगर आप यहाँ पे పబ్లిక్ यहाँ पे ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ స్టేట్ में ఒక స్టేట్ లో ఎవరు కూడా పని చేయట్లేదు, అంత మొత్తం అన్ఎంప్లాయ్మెంట్ ఉంది, and is it called it as a good state? You can't call it as a good state, because according to Aristotle, what said, the populations is essence to decide the futures of the state and how the state should be there, what the state should be there, all of them it is explained in terms of this kind of better state, isn't it? Let me explain that. According to the view of the state is a human institution, isn't it? The population, why do we require in the state means the state is a human institution, so there shall be no state without the people. Am I understanding? Are you all understanding? Without the humans, you can't call it as a state. State is a human institution. It shall be a no and state without the people. Population is mandatory to call it as a state. The first essential element is to be given to the population. Where these populations, if it could be, what is the exactly area to be called as a populations in the particular state? अगर आप यहाँ पे स्टेट बोला जाता है तो कितने लोग रहना चाहिए, कितना पॉपुलेशन रहना चाहिए? यहाँ पे 100 पॉपुलेशन होना चाहिए क्या, 200 पीपल होना चाहिए, 300 पीपल होना चाहिए? It's everything which is exclusively says that the state. On the other hand, French political thinker Rousseau fixed 10,000 as an ideal population for the state. And the view of this Rousseau is a French philosopher who said that which is to be called as a state means if any particular area consists of a 10,000 people and an ideal population, that it can be called it as a state, isn't it? However, in the modern times, it considered the populations of the state should not exceed right proportions of the resources and means. And in the Aristotle view as a state, when Rousseau gave in a particular digit to be called it as a state, and what actually Aristotle said, see, which is to be called as a better state in the state means where population should be there in the state, which is sufficient their resources. Okay. For example, यहाँ पे state में सारे लोग हैं, उनको the resources नहीं है, which is sufficient resources are not there, adequate and facilities are not there, that it cannot be called it as a better state, isn't it? So as Aristotle says that state is an essence factor is that in the populations required. Population along with the population, which kind of populations is required? The better population, discreted population, wise populations is required to making of a better state, isn't it? According to the Rousseau's, it has mentioned if the which areas to be called it as a state. If any area which consists of 10,000 people as an ideal population, that it can be called it as a state, isn't it? But according to the views of Aristotle, who says that the population, surely it will be there. It doesn't make a sense that in terms of digit, but it is make a sense in terms of intelligence and discretion. If populations are wise, if populations are, I mean, adequate to the state resources. So for example, अगर यहाँ पे state है, population ज़्यादा है, तो resources यहाँ पे कम है, adequate resources नहीं, then is it to be called it as a state? Is it this? Of course, the state is a human institution. It can be called it can be called it as a state, but it is not said that is a better state, isn't it? It is not called it as an ideal state. It's not called it as a super state because of population is more. Population is more. If it could become resources are less, it can be called it as a better state. Because to the point of resources, there must be a adequate population, adequate resources. It lead to the betterment of a state, isn't it? The best example is that is. So if it is so, I mean, adequate resources, if it is not there, the state may consist of different kinds of uncertainty. Let's say poverty causes, unemployment causes, which is lead to the, I mean, less expectancy of their life, and all those things, these consequences has happened. And if the adequate population, adequate resources, if it is not there in the state, is that clear? When it comes to the point of this, when it comes to the second factor, so Aristotle not only speaks about a state, meaning as in taking as an example of this in, I mean, population, and these populations in the second category, second element, he has explains that territory. Who gave, and the first, which kind of populations are required? Skillful population. Say, for example, the population determine the future of a state, as I have said. For example, if I take the names of an United States of America, if I take the names of many of states like Russia, United Kingdom, okay, Japan, all China, if all these names, if I chant, then all the states are treated to be as a developed state. What is the reasons behind it to be those state is called it as a developed state, isn't it? Because of there are the populations who are living with the skillful population is there. When it comes to the point of an India, since 70 years, we are calling that an India as an independent, and India is still, it is in the positions of development. Because of the reasons behind it that we had in certain levels of poverty, and we have also, have had an voluntary unemployment. Because of there is a lack of skillful training to the people, there is a lack of skill among the people, that it still India is to be called it as an, developing state, despite called it as a developed state. So population will decide the futures of the state, where it should be developed way, where it should be in the form of developing, where it should be, and decided in terms of underdeveloping status, isn't it? So Aristotle said that the first element is in essence to call it as a state. It is called, better state, and the skillful populations required. Then another territory, another element he spoke about, and which is to be called it as a better state, as well as to the how state, why the territory required to call it as a state. Let me tell you, territory is another essential element of a state. The land in which the people of the state make permanent residence is called the territory of a state, isn't it? Nomadic tribes cannot be called it as a state because of they do not have a particular territory. The Jews before 1948 too were not called it as a state because they were scattered throughout the Europe. They came to be called it a state only since 1948, after they began to settle permanently in the state of Israel. Okay, and which means, and territory, it makes it as a very, very important. It gives a fantastic definitions to be called it as a state. See, for example, when I take it as a name of a definition of, when I take the names of many thinkers, when I told you the definitions of a state, one among them, Blanskly says that organized society who lives in the particular, area, particular territory, we called it as a state, isn't it? They are to be called it as a particular state. And also Woodrow Wilson also says that organized society who follows the law, but they lives in the particular territory, that is to be called it as a state. For example, why do we say that this is a particular territory? Means without a particular territory, you can't actually mix it as a point in terms of a state. You can't define this as a state. For example, if particular area of the populations are being and living, it shall be called it as a state, isn't it? So territory, it becomes another element, another important. I have given an example, Europe before Jeeves, they're scattered across the world. and they were not called it as a state. Nomads, they were not having a particular, territory. They leave for a 10 days is a one area. They move from one area to another area. So their life is totally depends on one place to another place, the migrated basis. So if anyone who do not have a particular territory, that it can be not called it as a state, isn't it? For example, if I'm telling you an example of an India, India is a state, I can say, according to the constitution rules and all of them. Why I'm saying in the India state means it is a particular territory. Borders ఉన్నాయి. అది ఈస్ట్ వెస్ట్ నార్త్ సౌత్ అన్ని చోట్ల బార్డర్స్ కనిపిస్తూ ఉంటాయి. సో మనం బార్డర్స్ ఎప్పుడైతే ఉన్నాయో మనం పర్టికులర్ టెరిటరీ ఉన్నట్టు ఇక్కడ, isn't it? So particular territory where they have a population, that it can be called it as an element of a state as views of an Aristotle. And you know that generally, and the state which consists of a natural borders, like say for example India ki borders వచ్చేసరికి నార్త్ సైడ్ లో చూసుకున్నప్పుడు ఇక్కడ మనం నార్త్ ఈస్టర్న్ సైడ్ లో we sees that in Afghanistan, Pakistan, northwestern sides, if you could see, and northwest, if you could see, the Chinese interventions will be there. Similarly, southeast part, if you could see this, and in terms of this, many of nations, Maldives and all of them will be there. With the southern part, if you could see, Andaman Nicobar Islands as well as Sri Lanka, and many of nations we see that. So similarly, what I mean to say that in every territory has consist of a border. Those state has consist of a different borders, that it can be called it as a state. Is that clear? So as territory makes it as a very important, how skilled populations is required to make the betterment of a state. Similarly, size of population, and despite it, nature of territory also is a very, very important. Let me say, for example, based on territory, based on the atmosphere, based on the climatic conditions, based on the resources availability of a land, makes the nations as a pride. Say for example, if your nations are, you tell me the status of Rajasthan, anyone speak up, see, could you what is the status of Rajasthan since 1950? If you see the Rajasthan status, it's not so developed because of the area which has a desert area. There is no good water facility. When what I'm saying, skillful population make stands to develop the nation.
Sir, voice break ho raha sir.
Okay. 1 second. Yeah, it's a connectivity as well, but I don't know the reasons why it's been. Maybe your network issues will be there. Wi-Fi. It is an. Can you see the signal in your mobile? It should. Is
Sir,
my
actually, correct వస్తుంది sir sound.
Okay, fine. So I'll tell you the example that in territories makes it as a, the essential point to decide the futures of a state. How I say it, size of population, skill of the populations is make the state as a develop. Similarly, I take it as an example of United States of America, isn't it? If, for example, if I say, and one of the states in India, that is Rajasthan, if you take it as an example, Rajasthan is the develop as compared to Delhi. You say that, and as Chennai is the developed when you compare to this and Telangana, and can you say that, see, and if you take it as a continent wise, can you tell me this in Europe is developed when you compare to the Antarctic and Arctic region? So because of the climatic conditions of the area, the particular atmospheric area of an territory makes it and decide the nation's future, what it should be there. So for example, most of Jammu Kashmir is a developed state, okay, because of the natural resources, availability of water, availability of sources, and all of them, it's in high when you compare to the other states of Rajasthan, isn't it? But you can't say Rajasthan and Jammu and Kashmir equally developed because of why? What are the constraints to stop the Rajasthan to develop? Constraints are there is no particular and the size of good territory they have. Desert area ఉంటుంది. Desert area లో చాలా వరకు నీళ్లు వాటర్ ఫెసిలిటీ అనేది తక్కువగా ఉంటుంది. ఎప్పుడైతే వాటర్ ఫెసిలిటీ తక్కువగా ఉంటుందో అక్కడ అగ్రికల్చర్ కానీ ఫార్మింగ్ కానీ లేకపోతే ఇన్హాబిటేషన్స్ కానీ చాలా తక్కువగా ఉంటుంది. ఎప్పుడైతే ఇన్హాబిటేషన్స్ కానీ ఫార్మింగ్ కానీ అగ్రికల్చర్ కానీ తక్కువగా ఉన్నప్పుడు ఇన్కమ్ అనేది తక్కువగా జనరేట్ అవుతుంది. So this is the finest cause and the lifestyle. This shows influence on the development of a concerned state. So what Aristotle believes in that the state and it should be consist of a particular territory. but those territory must have a very quality. For example, say when United States of America is a developed, not only there is a skilled population, but also the climatic conditions and atmospheric conditions of the particular area would be the better for the United States of America to develop. Whereas, for example, when you latitude area, for example, see, if you see this in plateaus area, mountains area, deserts area, these are all the areas as not so suitable to develop. The territory is wrong. Can you tell me the people can make the state in the mid of the ocean? No. Okay. You say that the people will, make the state in the forest area? Absolutely no. Where actually state isn't, built up? Where actually, state can be built up means where territory have an adequate resources, where territory has a kind of better facilities to the people, where atmospheric conditions of the particular area, climatic conditions of the particular area would be the fine, isn't it? So you can't live in the latitude area because temperature is more, isn't it? You can't live from a polar regions, from the top of this, because then temperature is very less. So temperature is very less, the people cannot live. Temperature very more, the people cannot live. It's not suitable. It's not so suitable to living of an every human. What I mean to say, there should be a balanced climate. There should be a balanced atmospheric condition so that the people can live very comfortably in the particular area without having any problem, isn't it? So territory, it's a second element. It makes it out the futures of the state and the depends on that. You know that, for example, Russia, China, USA, India are having the territory exceeding lakhs of square miles. So it's a very big territory. Whereas, for example, if you could see the Vatican City and Samarejivo, Fiji, all these countries are not so suitable to develop themselves, isn't it? Because of the less territory, inhabitant, it's very less. There's no adequate resources for them. There's no point of reasons to say that, good mineral availability. See, today, as we are saying, area which consists of more water facility developed, the area which consists of more minerals or metals, the area will be developed. For example, if area which has been an availability of more diamonds, surely the area is going to be a developed, which means territory makes it as a very important to give the way for the development of a state. Hence, the second element is a very, very important to decide the future of a state, whether it should be developed state, whether it should be an underdeveloped state, isn't it? Next one, third element, which would be the government. The third element of a state is government. The agency created to enforce the such rules of conduct and to ensure obedience is called the government. The government expresses implements that will state. The state continues its existence through the government. Government consists certain officials who shape the will of the state and implement it. See, for example, when I am talking about an yesterday's social contract theory, why I gave an example. Why do we require this a contract? Why do we require a special government? Let's say, for example, government is nothing but who can take and who can, look after the people's thing, who can accomplish the needs of every individuals in the society who are living, and who can take care of the protections of entire state. For these activities, this government is required. Say, for example, if you remove the government in the particular state, could you imagine the status of the government, status of the state? Say, for example, if anyone who commits a mistake, where are the police officers? Let's see, for example. Still, if anyone who commits mistakes or who commits a crime, in order to regulate them, there is a court. Say, for example, remove the court, remove the government. Can you imagine the status of the state here? How would be the status of the state? It's a vulnerable, volatile. It's not in an organized way. One man will fight with others. One society will fight with another society. One community will have a revenge against another community, and one person always does a crimes. So all these uncertainty things and illegal things may cause. So there should be one regulation in the form of contract or in the form of government. See, for example, the population is there. Say, for example, all populations are very skillful. There should be someone who can organize them in the particular way. For example, see, population skillful ఉన్నటువంటి జనాన్ని అందరినీ తీసుకెళ్లి అన్ఆర్గనైజ్డ్ సెక్టర్ లో పెట్టేసి వాళ్ళు అన్ఆర్గనైజ్డ్ సెక్టర్ పనిసి వాళ్ళు చేస్తారా? చేయరు. ఒక టీచర్ ని తీసుకెళ్లి నార్మల్ గా ఏదో ఒక హార్డ్ వర్క్ చేయమంటే పొలాల్లో కానీ లేకపోతే కన్స్ట్రక్షన్ వర్క్ లో ఇచ్చినప్పుడు చేస్తారా? చేయలేరు. అంటే ఎవరికైతే స్కిల్ ఉంటుందో ఆ స్కిల్ కి ఇచ్చినప్పుడు అతను డెఫినెట్ గా ఆ పని చేయడానికి అవకాశం ఉంటుంది. जो लोग यहाँ पे जो स्किल है तो सारे जो लोग को जो स्किल है वही वर्क दिया गया है तो अच्छी तरह से करेंगे, वहां पे कुछ तरह के मिस्टेक्स नहीं होंगे. देखिए आप टीचर्स को लेके जाकर यहाँ पे जो भी अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर है, ताकि कंस्ट्रक्शन वर्क है या नहीं तो एग्रीकल्चर फील्ड है, जहाँ पे ले जाकर उसको टीचर्स को वहां पे अपॉइंट नहीं करते, ताकि वो वर्क नहीं कर सकते क्योंकि दे डजंट हैव अ काइंड ऑफ अ स्किल इन दैट. So teacher responsibility is that impart the knowledge to the student to make the tomorrow leaders, isn't it? Similarly, a farmer cannot teach to the professors. A farmer cannot teach to the students in the college, isn't it? So as there should be an organized setup, there should be a law setup should be there in order to make the better state. So in order to making the states in the right way, in order to making the populations in the right way, to utilized way, in order to whatever the resources are availability in the state, which in order to put them restrictions on them used for a particular use in the future use, it should be a form of a government, isn't it? For example, देखिए अगर यहाँ पे कहीं भी say for example take it as an example Golconda, there is a saying in Golconda, there is people have ruled out Golconda Nawabs, they have deposited the lots of diamonds inside the earth. If someone who tried to excavate it as an area of a Golconda, you will find the lots of diamonds over there. There is a saying, there is an the things which used to people say it than 100,000 years ago, isn't it? So what I mean to say, అంటే నార్మల్ గా సాలార్జంగ్ మ్యూజియం లో వెళ్ళేసి ఎవరంటే అక్కడ యూజ్ చేయలేరు. ఫలక్నుమా ప్యాలెస్ వెళ్ళి ఇక్కడ ఇష్టం వచ్చినట్టుగా పబ్లిక్ విజిట్ చేయలేరు. రిస్ట్రిక్షన్స్. ఓకే, అంటే in order to the crowded population, in order to control them, in order to make them in the restricted way, there should be a someone, isn't it? Say for example, this is someone itself is called it as a state, isn't it? Let me tell you one example here is that if you are in your family, okay, 10 members are there, okay, and all the 9 members are obedient towards your father. Father is an head of the family, if you think that, isn't it? If a father do not have any kind of restrictions to in your family, one can do it anything at all. He may do a kind of illegal thing, he may does a kind of an unfair things and all such kind of a thing. So until and unless they must have a restrictions, you cannot stop it all, isn't it? Similarly, what I mean to say that a bunch of resources ni, territory ni, a bunch of populations ni control cheyali ani anukunte, there should be a kind of a government. These government itself is called it as a third element in order to control, in order to utilize the things in the right way. And Aristotle defines to be called as a better state, there should be a third element is required, that is a state, isn't it? In order to maintain the equality, in order to maintain the organized setup, isn't it? In order to give the order to them, people can't listen. For example, see, remove the
Excuse me,
government.
sir.
Okay, if government, if you
Sir?
remove, see, if you have any sort of doubt, please ask me in the class.
No,
Okay?
sir, someone is disturbing the class.
Who's that?
E. Hari Prasad.
Yeah, I'll mute him, don't worry. Okay. Isn't it? So which means what I'm trying to tell it here is that there should be someone who can control you in your family. Similarly, and in order to control population in the state, in order to in order to put them into the restrictions, and there should be a government which is to be called it as a state government, isn't it? See, for example, if you remove the KCR government, what would be the next immediate situation? Law and order will disturb, one another will go into the clashes, religious disputes will come, and the one another will go, and the criminals will become more. So in order to that, if the government is made it as a restrictions to the society to use his power into the right way. So for example, across the world, we see the different kinds of government, and the parliamentary form of government, presidential form of government, unitary and the federal form of government. We see the different sort of government, which is being a part and parcel of this, third element of an Aristotle to be called as a better state. Let me tell you sovereignty. What is the sovereignty word meaning? Let me explain the general meaning of the sovereignty. Okay, let me listen here. You know, what I mean to say here is that fourth one is in sovereignty, to be called as a state. What is sovereignty? Sovereignty is a word in a meaning, general meaning. When you see that, sovereignty means supreme power. What is that sovereignty? It says that it is a supreme power. Okay. If supreme power or high end power, generally it will be treated as in sovereignty. Okay. See, the sovereignty can be two types: external sovereignty, internal sovereignty. What is the fourth element? It means that every state has its own sovereignty in order to taking of its decision. यहाँ पे हर स्टेट को एक sovereignty supreme power दिया जाता, इस इसको यूज कर कर I mean sovereignty को यूज करके, and the state may takes the decisions, okay, certain decision which cast betterment of a state. ऐसे डिसीजंस को लेने के लिए यहाँ पे सॉवरेनिटी की जरूरत होती है. सॉवरेनिटी, टू टाइप्स ऑफ सॉवरेनिटीज विल बी देयर. वन इज एन एक्सटर्नल सॉवरेनिटी एंड द इंटरनल सॉवरेनिटी. व्हाट इज एन एक्सटर्नल सॉवरेनिटी, इंटरनल सॉवरेनिटी? अगर कुछ भी, इफ एनीथिंग decisions, if it is taken by the state for the external matters of the nation, that it can be called it as an external sovereignty. If any decision is taken by the state for the internal matters of the state, that it can be called it as an internal, uh, sovereignty, isn't it? So what is the views of an Aristotle and in the views of this sovereignty? Sovereign means supreme, okay, supreme power, okay. Sovereignty is the most essential and the unique and distinguishable features of a state, and people organized for a law within the definite territory is not a state, but if they use the sovereignty, that it can be called it as a state. So external and at the same time, external sovereignty, internal sovereignty is required to making of a state. Say for example, and now Ukraine as well as the Russia is working on different kinds of dispute. They are working on a war between one another nation, and the Russia is willing to occupy the Ukraine. The Ukraine Zelensky, the president is not letting in Russia to, go back the Ukraine nationalism in the hands of Russia. So there is having a dispute. So the Russian president ఎప్పుడైతే యుద్ధం చేయాలని అనుకున్నాడో, అది అతను ఒక డిసిషన్, అతను ఒక సుప్రీం పవర్. అంటే దేశానికి సంబంధించినటువంటి ఏ అధికారాన్నైనా డెసిషన్ తీసుకునేటటువంటి కెపాసిటీ ఇక్కడ सॉवरेनिटी అని అంటారు. जहां पे भी अगर देश को यहाँ पे चलाने के में या नहीं तो देश में सारी तरह के यहाँ पे डिसीजन लेने की अथॉरिटी यहाँ पे स्टेट को रहती, and that authority which is contains by the sovereignty of a state, isn't it? Then taking decisions in order to war against the Ukraine, it also sovereignty of Russia. Nobody will disturb them, isn't it? So what I mean to say here is that all this thing, and every state has given and sovereignty in order to maintain it's a decision, in order to taking of a certain decisions on all of them. So as I have discussed the state, and let me tell you the brief about a state. What is a state according to the views of that? State is nothing but an organized society where a people lives in a particular territory is called as a state. Once again, I'm repeating general definition, not despite Bluntschli, Woodrow Wilson, Aristotle, and H.J. Lasky, and despite of all definition, what is the general definitions of the state to remember? Okay, state is nothing but the people lives in organized way in a particular territory is called as a state. Okay, again I'm repeating, the people who lives in organized way within a particular territory is called as state. Okay, state is nothing but a group of population who lives in the particular territory also is called as a state, isn't it? And generally Aristotle defines what is to be called it as a state means if anything which consists of four elements, that it can be called it as a state, because state is a human institution which consists of four elements. What are the four elements here? One is in population, second one is in territory, and the third one is in government, and the fourth one is that and sovereignty. All these four elements, if any of a particular place consists of it, it can be called it as a state in the views of Aristotle. Aristotle is a father of political science, who have defined that if any place is consist of a 10,000 idle population means Rousseau defines that state meaning is that if any area which consists of a 10,000 ideal population, that is also to be treated as a state, isn't it? All these things which we have discussed, and in this lesson, let me go ahead with this another word which is called civil society, isn't it? Of course, in the second way, if you could see, new terms also has been an increased that nation state, okay, growth of nation state systems has come into the effect. Tribal state, okay, we say, or Oriental state, Greek city state, okay, Roman world empire, all these things, and a feudal state, okay, modern nation state, all these different kinds of state systems which will be there, isn't it? Now I'll talk about very detailedly about the state and the government. How, see, what is relation between the state and the government? Let me explain what is state. I have explained to you already. Now let me explain about what is the government and how the state and government will have a better relations, isn't it? Government is regarded as an essential element of a state, as the third element which I have said it to you according to Aristotle. In actual practice, the state is represented by the government. Okay, government exercise all authority and functions on behalf of the state. However, the term state in the government should not be used as an identical or synonym terms. The state represents the wider or more stable entity than the government. In this sense, the state is greater and more inclusive than the government. If, for example, the state is a big institution, within the big institutions and one institute, it can be called it as a government. See, whatever the desires, what let's say, for example, Telangana state, okay, తెలంగాణ స్టేట్ లో ఉన్నటువంటి అన్ని నీడ్స్ ని అకాంప్లిష్ చేయడానికి ఇక్కడ మనం ఏం చేస్తామంటే ఒక గవర్నమెంట్ ని ఎలక్ట్ చేస్తాం. అది వన్స్ ఇన్ 5 years లేకపోతే వన్స్ ఇన్ 2 years వన్స్ ఇన్ 1 year అనేది డిఫర్ ఫ్రమ్ వన్ ఏరియా టు అనదర్ ఏరియా. But we take it as a government in order to executing the demands of the state, isn't it? When you compare to that, we can't make it out state and the government similar in terms because of it is not synonymous, and it doesn't have the same meaning. It has a different meaning. And state is different meaning when I tell you, and the government is in different meaning. Government is a subfield of a state. State lo oka chinna branch government. State is in higher institutions where it's one of the part of the state is that only the government, isn't it? So government unnatvanti state unnatvanti edaithe demands untayo, state lo unnatvanti populations oka demand ni complete ga accept chesi వాళ్ళు రిజాల్వ్ చేయడానికి ఉన్న కావాల్సినటువంటి ఎలిమెంటే ఇక్కడ గవర్నమెంట్. సో దిస్ without a state there is no matter of this, there is no point of reason to discuss about a government. Without a government you can't feel anything about a state. Say for example Telangana state ఉందని అనుకుందాం, గవర్నమెంట్ లేకపోతే what would be the status of the Telangana? There is nothing development, nothing discussions, everything will not be there. So what I mean to tell it here is that the government is in essence the state. Similarly, state is also the essence for the government. So both has a kind of a bilateral kind of a relations with them. So in keeping in view of that, and so state is a very important bit works on and the desires and targets of this government, isn't it? Similarly, we see the different kinds of government, and in indaka cheppan parliamentary form of government untundi. Parliamentary form of government means what? If a state consists of democratic setup of a government, it can be called as a parliamentary form of government. Let's say for example, in the parliamentary form of government we follow the democracy, like through the elections we appointed and every MLA, every MP of nation, even the Prime Minister of India also has been elected by the people itself. So anything it can be related to the democracy, that it can be called it as a parliamentary form of government. Let me say presidential form of government. There is no point of, there is no authority delegation, there is no power delegation, and there is no, even elections will be there. Head of the institutions will be decided by the president. President has an every power to decide what is to do, what to do, what not to do, everything. So the best example for the presidential form of government, if you can take it as, is the United States of America. Similarly, federal state. You know that FODUS is a term. Federal is a state is nothing but authority of delegation in two types. Sometimes it should be in the form of central government, sometime it should be in the form of state government. So So there is a state government, there is a central government. The best example for the federal government in the world is India. Like మన దగ్గర ఇండియాలో సెంట్రల్ గవర్నమెంట్ ఉంది, సెంట్రల్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్, సెంట్రల్ రూలింగ్ చూసుకోవడానికి. స్టేట్ లో స్టేట్ గవర్నమెంట్స్ ఉన్నాయి. అండ్ తెలంగాణ ఇండియాలో ఉన్నటువంటి అన్ని స్టేట్స్ కి అన్ని స్టేట్ గవర్నమెంట్స్ ఉన్నాయి. వాటన్నిటిని కంట్రోల్ చేయడానికి ఇంకో సెంట్రల్ గవర్నమెంట్ ఉంది. దట్ ఈస్ ద ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్స్ అండ్ ద ప్రెసిడెంట్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియా. So if anything, it's been divided into the two types of government, the authority and the delegations. If it's been division into the two types of government, that it can be called as federal state. India is a federal state because of we have a dual polity system, central polity, central government, state government. Every state consists of a separate government and all of them, isn't it? So governments are different from one area to another area, which is also been discussed under the state and the government, isn't it? So you shall discuss in the higher classes what is the meaning of a parliamentary form of government, features of parliamentary form of government, and also there's what are the working nature of the parliamentary form of government and everything. You shall discuss in the few classes, isn't it? So the state and government we have seen. So what is the state and government relations are here is that government is institutions or element. It's being a part of the state. State ఉన్నటువంటి సమస్యలను కావచ్చు, స్టేట్ ఉన్నటువంటి టార్గెట్స్ అన్నిటిని కూడా ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ చేయడానికి. ఇన్ ఆర్డర్ టు ఎగ్జిక్యూటింగ్ ఆల్ దోస్ థింగ్స్ should be a one government. This government consists of a different names, which is called as a parliamentary form of government, which is also says as a presidential form of government, even the government which is also named as a federal government. I gave an example to the particular way, but in detail about all the three types of government, you should discuss in the higher classes about all those things, isn't it? Now we are going to have discussions on that. Another word, it is an state and the civil society. You know, what is the meaning of civil society? Let me explain. Society is a complex network of associations of human beings, and that fulfills all their needs of from cradle to grace, in home to tomb. Ante oka particular place lo different communities, different language మాట్లాడే వాళ్ళు, different culture ni practice చేసేటటువంటి వాళ్ళందరినీ కూడా, and we called it as a society. You know, say for example, you may formed as an associations, right? Generally youth association, Vivekananda Youth Association, Bhagat Singh Youth Association. Association is a word, it tells us about in society, you know, where you can tell it as an entirely, if anything, it's been formed into the networks of societies. Different lakhs of crores of populations and all of them. It comes into the purview of in civil society. Civil is a word, it speaks about a citizenship. అంటే వ్యక్తులందరూ కలిసి जो लोग यहाँ पे सब लोग individuals लेकर यहाँ पे ग्रुप को बनाते हैं, यहाँ that it can be called it as an society, or if it is being formed by the human or citizens, that it can be called it as a citizen society. So if you see this one, when society having a members united together as citizens abided by the civil laws and lead the civilized culture. So in this one, civil society, which has its own kinds of particular rules and regulations, it follows as a part of the state, isn't it? The state will always makes it and aware of that, makes it dynamic to the civil society to follow the terms and conditions and all of them, isn't it? So all the state and the civil society, it makes it in different cultures and all of them, and it is being a part of this lesson. You should read all of them, state meaning, civil society, government, and all of them. In the tomorrow session, we try to discuss other things, other unit, that is a kinds of states. Okay, generally I said the state means network of population. You can say a group of population which is lives in the particular territory. It is to be called it as a state. And in states lo kuda rakarakala states untai. Yahan pe states mein different kinds of states bhi rahenge, aur usme and theocratic states ek state hota, और वेलफेयर स्टेट बुलाया जाता है, और टोटलिटेरियन स्टेट. यहाँ पे 3 तरह के स्टेट्स होंगे. जैसा गवर्नमेंट 3 काइंड्स ऑफ गवर्नमेंट जैसा होगी, फॉर एग्जांपल पार्लियामेंट्री फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट, प्रेसिडेंशियल फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट, फेडरल फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट जैसे हो गए. सिमिलरली स्टेट भी यहाँ पे 3 काइंड्स ऑफ स्टेट्स होंगे. एक स्टेट्स बोला जाता है यहाँ पे टोटलिटेरियन स्टेट, दूसरा स्टेट का नाम होता है एंड ए काइंड ऑफ थियोक्रेटिक स्टेट, एंड तीसरा स्टेट का नाम होता है वेलफेयर स्टेट. Welfare state के माने क्या है, or what is the meaning of a theocratic state, what is the meaning of totalitarian state, all such things we shall discuss in the another class. If you have any sort of doubts, you please ask me, and only I request you to ask the very subject oriented doubts and topic oriented doubt. Other doubts I will not entertain to explain. One by one, do not make it as an in nice, so that, and I'll give you the 5 minutes of time to discuss on all of them. And before it, and I just give you the some more introductions about this kinds of states, meaning only. Later on, I'll ask you the doubts by everyone one by one. Let me explain about what is a totalitarian state. Okay, I think you might have heard this terminology whenever you discuss the political science in the somewhere in the newspapers and everywhere. So let me explain and the state of this, totalitarian state. First one. Totalitarian means total. The word itself, you can see that in total. You know, the totalitarian state, it consists of meaning very comprehensively, and that the term totalitarian states tells us the meaning, denotes is a form of a rule in which the government attempts to maintain total. अगर यहाँ पे तेलंगाना स्टेट में हर तरह के यहाँ पे कंट्रोल एक ही गवर्नमेंट अगर लेती है, इट कैन बी कॉल्ड इट एज अ टोटलिटेरियन. यहाँ पे डेलीगेशन ऑफ पावर्स को चॉइस नहीं रहेगा और यहाँ पे डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ अथॉरिटी को चॉइस नहीं रहेगा. ये सारा का सारा अथॉरिटी अगर एक ही हाथ में एक ही रूलर में अगर है, so that it can be called it as a totalitarian state. There will be no chance of to speak anything. There is no freedom. There is no, kind of an authority to speak and to do anything. The best example is that Hitler. The second example, that in Benito Mussolini. And all these people who used to follow the totalitarian state means a person has all the powers related to state. There is no matter of to distribution and delegation of powers. Such a status can be called it as a totalitarian state. Example, Hitler state. Example, and Benito Mussolini, and all these names which comes under the purview of totalitarian states meaning. Okay. So next one, examples. So when you take it as an example of this in another word which is called welfare state. Welfare state in generally we call Hindi and even Sankshema Raj and Sankshema Rajam Ananta. Most probably in the world, many states are welfare states. India is a welfare state. It is written in the constitution, in the DPSP, in the point of, Adeshik Sutras. It says that India is a welfare state. What does it mean, India is a welfare state here? Welfare state meaning is that protection of, if any states undertakes the responsibility for the protection of social security of its every citizen in the country in case of unemployment, in case of illness and old age and the poverty, all these things, if they are taking in lots of responsibility, that it can be called it as a welfare state. The best example is a welfare state. See, if any states undertakes a responsibility to protect every individual or citizen of the country in terms of providing all them. So like, for example, India is a welfare state, the best example. It's taking an every responsibility of individual to protect it. Like India is, Indian government providing free of water facility to everyone, free of health facility in terms of Arogyasri, free of, protection that the law and order police peoples are working for the protections of individual, all of them. And Indian government also making a lots of policies to, providing the free health facility, free water facility, free protections and all of them. If any states are being providing all the basic amenities to the people in order to live their life without having any, disturbances, if these are all the responsibilities, if it is undertaken by the government of a particular state, that it can be called it as a welfare state. Okay. यहाँ पे state अगर सारे responsibilities को लेकर यहाँ पे public को सारी तरह के यहाँ पे amenities को provide करता है, basic amenities, जैसा कि water distribute करना free of cost without taking single rupee, जैसा कि यहाँ पे health facility, क्योंकि आरोग्यश्री policies यहाँ पे introduce करके सारे poverty line को treat करना, और government को ये भी responsibility है कि government employees को create करके, government jobs को create करके, government jobs को notification देना है. सारे तरह के वर्क्स यहाँ पे वेलफेयर स्टेट के रोल्स एंड रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज में आते हैं. अगर आप एक स्टेट सारे रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज यहाँ पे इंडिविजुअल प्रोटेक्शन के लिए लिया जाता है उसको वेलफेयर स्टेट किया जाता है, isn't it? अगर यहाँ पे सारे तरह के पावर्स यहाँ पे एक ही आदमी के हाथ में, एक ही रूलर के हाथ में अगर सेंट्रलाइज हो सकते हैं, उसको टोटालिटेरियन स्टेट्स कहा जाता है, जैसा कि हिटलर का एग्जांपल बोला, जैसा कि मैं बेनेटो मुसोलिनी का एग्जांपल भी बोल चुका हूँ, isn't it? And the next one is that theocratic state. अगर यहाँ पे and 1000 years ago the past, if you could take it as, the state was under the control of the theocratic is means old state, isn't it? Let me speak that what is it meaning of this state, which means rule of God. यहाँ पे स्टेट में यहाँ पे किसी को भी यहाँ पे इंपॉर्टेंस नहीं दिया जाता, बल्कि यहाँ पे रूलर को भी, यहाँ पे पब्लिक को भी। जब सारे लोग यहाँ पे राइट्स नहीं रहेंगे, देयर इज नो पॉइंट ऑफ रीजन टू डिस्कस एनीथिंग, देयर इज नो पॉइंट ऑफ रीजन टू लिसन एनीथिंग बाय द किंग. King believes that the powers have received from the God. It's like a theory of divine, isn't it? So यहाँ पे government and totally who believes into the kind of a God and godistic norms or theory of divine, and which it can be called it as the way of theocratic state. So all this example which I have given to you to understand. However, tomorrow we shall understand that theocratic states meaning, or welfare state meaning, and the features of welfare state, definitions of welfare state, and the totalitarian state, the features of totalitarian state, the definitions of totalitarian state, and all those things we'll try to understand. So over there, this is the class of the today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much. Be patient, and I'll take it as a doubt for everybody. Pope is nothing but it's an head of the church. Anyone? I'll see the text to everybody. You can text it me because you can't speak up. What is parallel society means, the society which similarly use the same culture. Okay, for example, which is can be called it as an society which is accept the similar thing, rules and regulations and all of them. It can be called it as a parallel society. Okay. So anything else to still more to talk about in subject matter, you can unmute yourself and you can speak to me, because I have given the permission to everybody right away. Yeah, you can write the answers in the box form itself. There's no matter of that.
What is the Oriental state?
Sovereignty is nothing but is a supreme power. Okay, sovereignty means supreme power. If any state has a full of powers in terms of decision making, if it is not depends on any other while taking up decision, and that it can be called it as a sovereign state.
But two types of sovereignty is there now. How
no,
we can classify it?
In a totalitarian state, power will be in the hands of one man army. That's the reason I gave example Hitler. Anything else? Still, I'll take your doubts, and after 2 minutes of that, and after that, I'll wind it off. Okay. See you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Sir, what is federal government?
Yeah, tell me. What is it?
What is federal government?
Federal government means if any state consists of two types of government. One is central government, another one is state government. If powers are being distributed into the two levels, it can be called it as a federal government. Hope you understand India as a federal government, because here we follow the two kinds of government. One is that central government, another one is in state government. Hope the answer for the question complete.
Sir, what is Oriental state?
Oriental state is a state which is speaks about the things in the past. For example, Oriental state of Kautilya. On how the state existence was in the past and all of them. It speaks in the Oriental state. Everyone, thank you so much. Bye-bye. I will meet you on next Sunday and Saturday. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.